You asked, we answered. My producer Marty and I over here, who you cannot see, but I'm pointing to her, we popped onto my Instagram story and asked you guys to send in some thought-provoking questions that I hope will trigger some very heart-centered, introspective answers. And I have no idea what Marty's going to ask me. She went through the question box where you guys submitted, and she is picking each and every question, and she and I are just going to have an awesome conversation like we usually do behind the scenes. And I hope that through this episode, I'm able to answer some of your curiosities, talk about life with you, just kind of go deeper into some of the topics that we're all thinking about at this time in our life and that we often wish we had someone else to ponder with and bounce off of. So I hope this kind of like sparks your curiosity and your own internal or external dialogue with your people. And yeah, I'm in like a little bit of a tender mood today. So you're going to get a very tender Liv, who is kind of like a little sad today. So I wonder how I'm going to answer these, like from sad girl mode or like serious, woomy, heart-centered mode. But I'll be just as shocked as you are. Let's get into it.
Let's talk real life, right? I think the best way to move through life is to always be the student and to always be curious. Life will show you either way. It's just how you choose to listen. You can always count on you. You will always have your own back. This is not the last thing you'll create. Play is the process. Sometimes it has to be dramatic. That's the funny part. When your back's up against the wall, you will prevail. You're allowed to grow and change. You're allowed to birth something new. I hope you make your art.
I want to start light.
She's going to start light, guys.
I want to start light. Yeah.
She's not going to bang me over the head.
How do you get in alignment and move out of a place of fear?
How do you get in alignment and move out of a place of fear? That is such a wonderful question. And I think it is a constant practice, not something that is done and checked off of a list. Okay, I recently read this book called The Surrender Experiment. I was telling you about this. And it's by the same guy who wrote The Untethered Soul. I've heard and read a bit about how the untethered soul is a whole book about how you are not your thoughts kind of thing. And there's this voice in your head at all times, as we all have, that's narrating our lives and saying, this person doesn't like me. They gave me a weird look. I shouldn't do that thing. Everyone hates me, whatever. And then there's you who is the observer, which shows that if you can observe that voice, you're not that voice. And I guess the whole point of that spiritual book is to help you differentiate and become just the observer who recognizes that voice as like the ego or the human part of you, and that you're more of like a soul or a spirit having an experience. And in the Surrender Experiment, he references how the recognition of that voice helps him to start a cascade of a very spiritual life, even though he ended up becoming a businessman of like a $300 million company. But he ended up being able to recognize so clearly that that voice at all times was going to push back against any bit of discomfort or change or anything that was against its narrow preferences. And he made this bet or this experiment with himself that every time the voice pushed back, he had to kind of do the opposite, or he had to allow the thing that was coming. Because his whole thing is that if an opportunity is coming to you, if there's this natural flow of life, he says, I guess some would call it God, right? I would maybe call it God, but it's this flow of the universe, flow of life, order of things. And if that flow of life, or if God is bringing you an opportunity, you are supposed to kind of say yes to it, not because it's going to be end game, but because it's going to be part of the flow that gets you to the next thing and then teaches you the next lesson. And then it's like your next stepping stone. And usually it's better to follow the flow of how things are happening naturally than to force and try to make things happen in our plan, right? It's like people use that quote, we make plans and God laughs. So it felt very much like that. And he talks so extensively about how this voice has its likes and dislikes, and that you can't really kind of like, it's almost selfish to, I guess, base your life around your preferences and your likes and dislikes and what would feel good and what wouldn't feel good, because that doesn't really lead you to a life of purpose. It just leads you to a life of preference. And I guess if we all had our preference, we would stay in bed with snacks all day, which would be great, but we might not have much fulfillment. So his whole life was about kind of killing off that voice And it made me realize that you are always going to have that voice. Even this guy who became this very like spiritually ascended human that could do anything and be in a jail cell and meditate and find acceptance of his current circumstances. You could be the most ascended person. You're still going to have that voice of fear because you're always going to be human. And so it's about learning to live with that voice and learning to live with the voice of your heart that's saying, trust the flow, trust the magic of this, trust this opportunity, trust yourself to meet this occasion that scares you, trust that your desire for this thing or that your gift and ability to do this thing is stronger than your fear. And it's about choosing the voice of your heart every single time. So I don't think that fear ever goes away, but I think that if you are heart-led, which means you also listen to your heart when it's sounding alarm bells and says, I can't explain why, but this feels off, don't do it, then you're going to have a pretty good life. And I think that the hard part is just learning how to differentiate between the voice of your heart and the voice of fear.
Fear itself, it's such like a tool if you learn to use it as a tool. When you're brave, that's when the universe kind of rises up to meet you. Mm-hmm. So fear will show you where you need to be brave, which will show you where you will be met. So if you're like feeling in a place of stuck, go to what you're afraid of.
Yeah, and meet that fear from your heart. Mm-hmm. Meet that thing you're afraid of with your heart. Don't meet it also with force, or also like don't meet it from that fearful place. Like if you're having a really hard conversation, for example, and you've been spinning out all week, can't sleep because you're replaying in your mind 1,000 times the different scenarios that could unfold, and you're almost trying to have that conversation before it even happens to have some semblance of control. I think that is the fear part of us that activates in the mind, right? And it usually doesn't go away until you're on that day where you're in front of that person and you're about to have the conversation and you have no choice but to now be present and brave. Like instead of approaching it defensively and just approaching it in terms of how can I just say what's extremely true and humble and loving, but also firm in every moment? How can I just be brave enough to tell the heart-centered truth in every moment? Then the proof of your actions will be a lot stronger than the fear, and it'll kind of be sitting with you, like never goes away, but it's going to be outshined by how present you are in the bravery of being in your heart. And I think you know fear by the mind. Like it's anxiety and fear is what takes us out of our heart, right? So it puts us in our mind. So whenever I'm noticing that I'm in my mind so much that I'm trying to play out scenarios, that I'm thinking so much, I'm sitting there and I'm being very cerebral. I'm not remembering I have a body. I'm not remembering I have feet. I'm not wanting to go for a walk. Like I'm wanting to be here instead of anywhere else in my body. I can tell that I'm being led by anxiety. Whereas when I'm being led by my heart being like, hey, look at this thing, like my intuition or something, it's much more from a place of being grounded in my body. And I think that only happens when we can quiet the mind. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to actually not talk. I recently took a day of not talking, as I told you. I did my best. There was a few times I talked to Banks and I was like, damn it. But I took a vow of silence that day. It started because I had one day when I had a sore throat. I had like horrible laryngitis and I just physically couldn't talk. And I noticed how peaceful my mind became throughout the day and how by the end of the day, I had so much space for the insights of my heart to come through because I wasn't letting my mind tell me what my mouthpiece was going to say all day. Like I wasn't letting it have full reign and just kind of like work with my mouth and just yap all day. I kind of like brought that external energy inward. And when you draw your energy inward in any kind of way, it goes, I think, to your heart and you start to get those pings come up. So whenever I'm having a time where I know I'm in my mind, I'm making decisions based out of fear or disempowerment or like any place other than my authentic self, I try to take a weekend day to be silent. And by the end of that day, even if I'm journaling, you know, I'll let myself journal because I find that's more from my heart. But I find by the end of that day, I'm back into that place of really grounded clarity, and I'm back with myself. I'm not with the fear. I'm not with someone else's expectation. I'm not with all the scenarios out there in the world. I'm in here. I would find that I would have like a really big moment of clarity. Because I think as we grow and as we face difficult things, we're brought these whooshes of clarity. And when it hits and you kind of harness it and you write it all down and you tell your friend, oh my God, I got clarity about the situation. I feel so good about this finally, even though I know it's going to be hard. I finally know that it's what I want. It feels right. It feels true. The equal and opposite rubber band reaction to that whoosh of clarity is usually a whole new set of fears, because it's exciting and novel when it comes in. And then that exciting novelty turns into, oh my God, we have to make all these changes now. And of course, the fear comes back just as hard as the clarity hit. And so it's this annoying dichotomy where oftentimes clarity can be followed by cloudiness. And it's not that something's wrong with us or we lost that clarity. It's just that we need to like find the way to come back to it and find the way to like get back to that connection that was in that we already know, because we already had the ping. It's in there. Just like finding a way back home in the face of our very human ego voice and fear. So I had this wish of clarity, then had a whole week where I was like second guessing every bit of it and was like, never mind, it would be so much easier if I just didn't act on that clarity. Here's all the reasons why I shouldn't. And then there was this little part of me that was like, yeah, if you don't act on it, you're not honoring yourself. And now that we know, and we felt that day of how clear honoring yourself felt and how good honoring yourself felt by being truthful with what you needed to do, we kind of can't accept anything less. Sorry. And so I was so driven by the desire to get back to the self-honoring that I said, okay, what do I need to do to get back to the truth of my heart? I need to just shut up for a day. It worked.
Another relevant question, how do you get comfortable with change?
Change is not comfortable. The only way I have found in my life to lessen the blow is to make change a bit of a constant, but that can't apply at all times. Sometimes you need a rest. Sometimes you need status quo, normalcy, stagnancy, whatever. You just need things to be nothing for a while. But for most of my life, I have noticed that as like a body emotion stays in motion, and that as long as I'm constantly changing and flexing that muscle and constantly reminding myself that I'm not necessarily entitled to comfort and that that's not necessarily the nature of life. And so by being in relationship with change, which is probably the truer version of my life, I'm also honoring reality. And I'm going to like make it a lot easier if reality were to choose to smack me in the face, because I'd already be part of the flux of change. Yeah, I just try to like constantly stay in it and allow it, because nothing really ever stays the same. Like I remember this summer I was outside on my deck and I was laying on the patio furniture and I was noticing how like just even one day to the next, the way that the sunlight was hitting the leaves and creating shadows was so different. And I'm like, oh, like I will never have this day, like August 27th light in this year ever again, where the leaf was exactly in this position and my plant was healthy over here and my dog was sitting with me right here. Like you just never get anything twice or again. And that's the beauty of life. And it's also the pain of life. And so remembering that change is in our nature as humans, it's in the nature of the seasons, it's in the nature of life and death and the cycle of why we're here, doesn't make it easier. It just maybe brings us closer to the truth that it's inevitable. And there's this guy I really like, he's a songwriter. His name is Teron Thomas. And he was talking about how every morning he wakes up and like eats a tiny slice of humble pie and is like, all right, I'm not that important. Whatever I do today, I need to like not be greedy about it. If I write a hit song and like there's 5 other people in the room, we're all splitting it equally. I don't care. I don't want the fights. Like whatever. Like he just wakes up and he eats a tiny bit of humble pie every day. And like it makes his life so much easier, he says, because not like fighting about the little things means that you don't have to eat a huge plate of humble pie one day, which is going to taste so bad that you can't choke it down. And I guess it's like the same with change. It's like reminding yourself through tiny ways each day that change is constant prevents you from being so shocked by the times in life when it happens in really big ways.
Change isn't something that you're necessarily like shepherded through, but it is something you learn to hate as a kid. No one teaches you nostalgia or how to like value the past and present at the same time.
Oh my God, I'll never forget when I asked my parents, I was like, my birthday, I was like at the bus waiting for my bus to, I don't know, like maybe it was like kindergarten or first grade. Maybe this is my earliest memory. I don't know. I asked my parents like, okay, so this summer, my birthday, it's August 12th, 1993, right? And they were like, no, that's like your actual birthday, like when you were born. But this year is 1996 or whatever, like 1998. I don't know what it was. And I was like, what do you mean? I'll never be in 1993 again? I just didn't understand time. And they told me like, no, like this year's 1998 and next year's 1999. And I was hysterically crying that I would never be in 1993 again. Like, I think it's such a normal human emotion to be so destroyed by the grief of change and that like nothing ever stays the same, that we're constantly in a state of flux. And I think it's so important to like love everything so deeply in the moment, knowing that you're going to lose it. Like I've talked before about how often I remind myself that I'm going to lose banks. And it's just, there's something that keeps me mentally healthier to remind myself of that, because it helps me to be more present with him, and it helps me to prepare myself for that, and it helps me to stay in reality. Like it helps me to stay in reality that's going to happen, that everything changes, that you could lose anybody tomorrow, that like you just can't hold too tight to anything. Even, you know, things have changed so much in my life that even when I'm having like a conversation with a beautiful friend or whatever, I'm like, I've lost many friends before. I've lost family, you know, family members have died. Like we lose so many people, not in like even a tangible way, but just they're in your life one day and gone the next, because things change, people change. Like I'll even in conversations think about that. Like, this is so nice right now. I'm so glad that I can call this person, that our relationship is so healthy. But at the same time, I'll be okay if one day it's not. Like I constantly kind of have to think like that, because I tend to, my nature is to be such a rigid person that's so opposed to change and like needs a routine. And I think at the same time, it's a good cushion to like have things in your day or life that are constants as much as you can control, to have like routines so that change in external circumstances is not so earth shattering. Like having yourself, having the way that you like to take care of yourself every day, having your practices, connecting with yourself, journaling. I think those things are so important, because you know that no matter how the world changes around you, you know you have you to go through it with you.
Somebody said that to me at one point, like when like the world kind of crashed down. They were like, this is why you have your skincare routine.
Yeah.
This is when it's applicable.
Well, that's the thing. Like your world is going to crash many times in your life. Like we're going to go through a lot of teardowns if you are someone who's always looking to grow. Like you're going to have to probably walk back the entire mural of your life that you just put up a few times if you live to 90, right? So yeah, there's a reason that we have like those few little things that we can hold on to and have control over, so that we can just like buckle in and hold on tight to ourselves while that happens, because it's happening for our greater good. I think that's also why it's important to journal. Like I can't tell you, I think it's probably the most valuable tool I've ever used is my journal. Like if I had to pick one thing, because there's such an importance to like holding the history of your life. Nobody else is going to hold a historical account of your life and all of the special moments that make it yours and have made you who you are today. And, you know, the times that you doubted yourself, the times that you had a really wonderful moment in a relationship or a really big win in your mindset or your career. Like you have to be the keeper of your story, and all of your power lies in your story, because the more that you understand it and know it, the more you can make meaning out of it and connect the dots to like have a grounding in this life. I think if you hold your story, if you keep track of your story and have that evidence to look back on, you can then flip through those pages as many times as you need to to remember how much things have changed in the last 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. And you look back and you're like, oh, wait, yeah, I totally forgot, that this thing happened and that I was devastated this day and that I, had this breakthrough this day and that life was really beautiful here and sucked here. And because you get these data points of it sucked before and it changed before and it's changing now, but it'll be okay, just like I'm okay today reading these pages back. It's like this way to kind of have your past self comfort you in a way. You survived all of that change in that journal over the last year. And sometimes, when you're living it each day, you don't notice it. If I were to just say, okay, from today to last year, what has changed? I'd say a good amount. But if I were to look in my journal and like bullet points it out and have to really see and feel and go back to like how much I've unearthed and worked through this past year, I would have a lot more to be proud of, and thus I would have a lot less resistance to change because I would feel that sense of like pride and accomplishment around it. So yeah, how can you have a stronger way to hold on? How can you have a stronger practice and lens in which to make meaning out of that chaos? How can you make it fun? How can you make it into a story? How can you look forward to what's going to come from that change? It's like perspective. Perspective is the only way to make it through change.
If you were an herb, what kind of herb would you be?
I love that one. I've been asked that before. I would be a poisonous plant because poisonous plants are extremely medicinal. They are our most potent healers. Like a poisonous plant can clear a very graduated illness that a lot of other plants can't. So we pull them out of our repertoire when something is so bad that the medicine must be as heroic as the disease, kind of. And so the thing is that you use a lot lower of a dose of a poisonous plant, and you need it in these like small doses to have an effective like therapeutic consumption of it to have the desired results. But it's strong medicine, and it's very like misunderstood medicine. And so like poke root, for example, when I was making my care packages a few years back with COVID, obviously my parents were in a hospital. I couldn't visit them, couldn't help them. All I could do was advocate over the phone. And they were in such a state that they absolutely needed pharmaceuticals and whatever people could throw at them. And so I, as an herbalist, was thinking about community care and people around me who were going to be watching all of this and terrified. And like, I also myself had COVID because I was taking care of my dad. And so I was looking for a tincture that I could make for myself. And it was just such a scary thing. So I wanted to be able to do something. So I started formulating this tincture for myself based on being able to feel the virus in my own body, because every virus is so different. Sometimes you have a wet cough, sometimes you have a dry cough, sometimes it changes. Like the energetics of herbs are so specific that you're not going to use a drying herb for a dry cough, So you have to customize the medicine. So I felt really lucky that I had COVID at the time because I got to take notes on the energetics of it and the exact presentation and make such a reliable formula that ended up working for a lot of people. And I made this lung tincture and I started delivering it to people. Like I would mix it up and I would just like leave it on people's doorsteps, like friends who texted me. And I would also send them like packets of orange peel tea, and I would leave them quercetin and zinc capsules, like their little COVID care package that eventually became some of the formulas on my site, like Microbiome Guard and Zinc Plus. And people who had really early stages of COVID and like a cough that hadn't got too bad yet, my original tincture helped them a lot. Like if they took it early enough, it was great and it cleared it. But once I noticed that for some people, once it had kind of progressed and people had like a much deeper cough or like a back pain, which is more like a sign of like pneumonia, like a really severe respiratory infection, which usually means that it also went bacterial, not just viral, then they needed a bit of a stronger medicine. And so as an herbalist, I understand how to use certain like, quote, poisonous plants that are medicinal in very small doses to help move something that's either like there's such toxic damp heat in an infection that it needs a little bit of a mover from a, quote, poisonous plant, or there's like it just kind of gives it that extra oomph. So I started putting just a few drops of poke root into like a whole tincture bottle for some of these lung tinctures that I was making for people who had it really bad. And they would call me the next day and be like, I can breathe. I don't understand like what you gave me, but I can breathe. Like I could lay on my side again or whatever. Like my back's not killing me. And the infection would start to clear. And that's how powerful a poisonous plant is, that you just need a few drops and it's enough to start to like clear and move that damp, stuck, toxic heat that's in the lungs, like that phlegm or infection. And so I became really interested in poisonous plants because as I was formulating that tincture, the line that I just said was what popped in my head. I don't know if like an ancestor whispered it in my ear, but I kept hearing a heroic disease needs a heroic medicine. Like I kept hearing that over and over again before I put the poke in. And then I put the poke and I was like, okay, I got it. Obviously, I didn't put poke root in the tincture that I sell on my website, and you should be using it early on, and it's more than enough. This was more like emergency cases. But that's the power of poisonous plants. And yet, if you take them in really high doses, it's not going to be a good day for you. It's not going to be great. But man, are they strong medicine, and man, are they clearing. Like they are clearing to toxicity. They come in with a punch. And of course, they're misunderstood because if you were to read, if like a company were to sell just a tincture of that plant, there would be warnings and this and that. And people are like, don't take that. It's toxic. But the dose makes the poison or the medicine. And I feel like that about myself. I feel like I am a very strong energy. Okay. I feel like I can be very honest sometimes, very blunt to the point where it can make people almost uncomfortable. I feel like I can make a little sarcastic joke that cuts like a knife, that I can like see right through to someone's thing or someone's problem. And it's almost like inappropriate for me to say it out loud because I'm seeing people like so laser clear. And I also feel like sometimes I come into people's lives when they really need it in a little bit of a dose, and then I'm out, and they're better for it in the long run, but they don't really understand that at the beginning. Like sometimes I'm a little bit of a very medicinal poison. But like, it's just because I'm strong and I'm sharp, and like that's my nature, and it ultimately helps. And the right people can handle enough of me, but it's like a select few. You got to understand the medicine.
I was going to ask, what do you think is the key then to because you have very long-term friendships. So what antidote, what is the key that
I think they're poisonous plants too. I think that we're like the weird witchy women and we just get each other. Like it's, it doesn't matter because they're just as potent as I am. I feel like with my friend group, it's like only the strong survive. Like only like there's been plenty of people that I feel like have been, like when Full House has like a guest character, like a supporting character that's on for like an episode or like a season. Like we've had many supporting characters come into the cast, and it doesn't always, and not for like, drama or tea reasons, but they don't always stick around because you gotta be like really, really, really committed to the path. I feel like to be in our little coven, you gotta be working on yourself at all times and really kind of like committed to yourself and your growth and seeing the truth and continuing to like pull back your trauma and be more and more aware of like what energy you're bringing, because all of us are kind of growing at such intense speeds that if you don't kind of like join the upgrade in your own work and in your own life, you might rejoin the circle for a hangout and be like, wait, like, I don't know. There might be like a little bit of a disconnect because when you're doing your own work, you're just becoming so self-aware that a lot of the bullshit falls away. So you just kind of like stop bringing your bullshit to other people, or you bring it in a much healthier way. And like, because the girls are also working on their stuff, like they just wouldn't be the type to accept bullshit anymore. So it's like we just all kind of show up in more and more and higher integrity. And yeah, that's why it works. It's a very, very, very special group. But I don't know. I've graduated / lost just as many people as I've kept in my very strong circle. I think because I have a little bit of the darkness in me, I can talk, you know what I mean? Like it's like a little bit of the poison. I got poison in me. And I'm not ashamed to say that. Like it's also my power. It's why I can maybe reach someone else that like feels dark and poisonous and is like, I could never do XYZ. Like she must, have a perfect life or be whatever. And I'm like, no. Like I'm a piece of shit sometimes. Like, let me tell you about my darkness. So it helps me to like be more effective in the medicine that I do have to deliver because I have some darkness.
What is the hardest ancestral energy to clear for you?
Ooh, the fear of being alone. That's a really big one. A lot of times, like, growth requires you to continuously honor yourself on deeper and deeper and deeper levels. And as you continue to honor yourself, you will find that you inadvertently dishonor dynamics that were perhaps not healthy along the way. And so sometimes honoring yourself and choosing what you can now see is best for you does mean disappointing someone else and feeling like you've failed. And so sometimes honoring yourself does mean that you will be alone in a way. It does mean that you will lose a dynamic where you and another person were using each other to avoid being alone, because now you can be alone and you know that it is the most honorable thing that you can do for yourself to choose what's right for you instead of what will keep you stuck with that person. So I think I've always had this very deep fear of being alone because I've always known that I do move quickly and that I have a big mission in life and that honoring myself means that I will be alone. And I've always been alone from a very young age, being an only child, being so different, not having a lot of people that really understood me as a kid, being mostly friends with adults, just not being able to connect with other children. I just really always felt very alone in this life. And so I think that's why I also very specifically gravitated towards relationships and things and substances even that soothed that loneliness or aloneness or made me artificially feel less alone or made me feel like, well, I have this thing I can latch on to that means I'm not alone because I always have access to this thing or this person or this dynamic or whatever. So I think a lot of times every self-sabotaging thing I've done in this life has been subconsciously to avoid my deepest fear of being alone. And recently, my one of my coaches had asked me what percentage of that fear of being alone is yours and what percentage of that fear of being alone belongs to your lineage. And I was like, oh, it's 20/80. And the reason I came to the conclusion that it was 20/80 was because I was like, okay, realistically, am I really that afraid of being alone? Like, I love being alone. There's nothing I love more. Like, at this stage of my life, solitary, alone time, me and my journal, me and some music, me and nature, like that is everything to me. And I need a lot of that. I've always needed a lot of that. And I didn't realize how much like trying to not be alone forced me to avoid what I needed. But I was like, okay, so I'm maybe like actually 20% afraid of being alone, but it feels so all encompassing because it's a lineage thing. I was like, oh, I'm carrying this for my ancestry, for the women in my lineage who had a very real reason to fear being alone, who if they did tell the truth and say, I don't want to be with this partner, it means that they would be maybe like partnerless, homeless, and poor in the old country and like actually not have anyone to provide for them. Like for so long for women, alone meant actual physical danger. Choosing themselves meant actual physical danger. Choosing their art, their gifts, their own growth was simply not allowed because being alone was very scary. And so I realized that there were so few opportunities for the women in my lineage to say their no's. And I think that's why I've had such a hard time like finding my no as well. Not like I don't say no to the little things, but I have a hard time saying no to the really big things, the things that will cause me to perhaps be alone, even when they're not right for me. And so I recently realized that like so many of my female ancestors just did not have choice in so many parts of their lives, didn't have the choice to say no, didn't have the options that I have now, and that it is my job to make some of the most difficult choices I've ever had to make in order to honor them. And that's been really hard to do, even though I know they're all cheering me on. And when I had that session with the coach, she had me like, you know, she's like, well, where are you standing? Like, ask them to come around you. And I was like, okay, I'm at the edge of the water. And I visualized like all of my female ancestors on my mom's side sort of like standing in an arc behind me. And they were sort of all gazing at me, like kind of like from around the bend, being like, what's she going to do? Do we think she's going to do it, guys? Is she going to break the curse? Like it felt like they were like watching and waiting to see what I would do. Mm. And that this was like such a big thing for me. So yeah, that accepting that when I allow myself to act on my needs and my truth, I might be alone, but that's okay. Like that sentiment in itself, like even just practicing saying no, practicing saying, hey, this is what I need. All of that is like what I've had a hard time breaking. And ever since I made the decision to, since I had that session, I've had so many chances where I've needed to practice doing it. And it's to the point where the other day I was like on this call and I got so hungry and I felt like I was going to pass out. Like my stomach was killing me. And I was like, I had to stop and be like, hey, I know that we have 20 more minutes left in this. I have to go and eat. Like, I'm so sorry. I don't know why that was so hard for me to do, to like abruptly end it. Sometimes it's like that on phone calls too. Like I'm so afraid to assert my needs and be like, hey, I actually have to get off the phone right now. And I'll just stay in situations or I'll stay in things even when I have a need. And I'll just like tell my body to be quiet and ignore that need. But I'm starting to practice in little ways like that, like ending a Zoom call when I need to eat. And it's because my mind is like, it's just food. It's just hunger. Like that's not as important as this Zoom call right now. But the more you practice, like even meeting your body's physiological needs, like when it says I need a nap right now, or I need a snack right now, or I need a walk, or I need to get off the computer and pee for the last 20 minutes and you haven't let me pee, like stuff like that. Just even meeting your core biological, physiological needs can start to train you to feel it's safe to meet some of your greater needs. Like, hey, the way that you're speaking to me isn't working for me. Hey, I don't feel comfortable when you do X, Y, and Z. Hey, you know, like those are the really hard things, but it starts with the tiny ones. Mm. And for me, it's very, very ancestral. Yeah, it feels like I'm at the edge of embarking on a very wild path. I do get the feeling that everything's about to change. Yeah. Like I'm just like really, I'm like, the like snow globe is like turning and like I'm really trying to hold on to the floor so that I don't like plop to the bottom of it with all the snow. But like, it's like I'm really about to lose my grip and enter a totally different life, but I don't know what that is. I mean, I know what it could be, but I still don't know. I know it could be the catalyst, but I have no idea what it's going to look like. Sometimes you can just feel it. Sometimes you can just feel that everything's about to change. And sometimes it is preceded just by this like sense of freedom and like, I don't know, like this like sense of like unchaining yourself. Like I feel like very not dependent on anything right now. Mm-hmm. Like I don't need any one thing or person for the first time in my life, which is a very scary and wild place to be, and the place that my ancestors probably always wanted to be. And I'm there. So what am I going to do with it? You know, that's the big thing. What am I going to do with that? Am I going to actually stop and ask myself, what do you want? Like me? Or am I going to take this moment of realization and opportunity that for the first time I'm not dependent on or don't need anyone or anything and just like stay with what I got? Or am I going to like really ask that tough question and then act on whatever the answer is? That's a crazy crossroads to be at.